You walk into a room where two people are already mid-conversation. You didn't interrupt. You didn't knock anything over. You just walked in. And the first thing out of your mouth is, "Sorry, am I interrupting?" They say no. You sit down. And 10 minutes later, when you want to add something to the conversation, you say, "Sorry, I just wanted to say..." You didn't plan either of those apologies. They arrived before the thought did. Or maybe it's this. Someone bumps into you on the street. Their shoulder hits yours. And before they've even turned around, you've already said, "Sorry," to the person who walked into you. Or this. You ask a colleague a question at work. Something simple, reasonable, the kind of thing people ask each other every day. And it starts with, "Sorry to bother you, but..." You do this so often that you've stopped noticing it. The word has become something you breathe out, not something you mean. A reflex before a sentence. A tax you pay before you're allowed to take up space. Here's the thing about that reflex. It didn't come from politeness. It didn't come from empathy. It came from somewhere older and quieter than both of those things. Think back to being a child who needed something. Not something big. Help with a task, 5 extra minutes, a little attention. And the response you got was a sigh. Or a look. Or that particular silence that said, "Not now." Or maybe even, "Not you, not this, not again." It might not have been dramatic. It rarely is. Just a consistent atmosphere. The sense that your needs were an inconvenience. That asking created friction. That the version of you who needed something was less welcome than the version who didn't. And so the child makes a calculation. If my needs make things harder, I'll minimize them. And if I must ask, if I have no choice, I'll apologize first. Preempt the disappointment. Make myself small before they can make me feel small. The apology wasn't weakness. It was strategy. It kept the peace. It maintained the relationship. In the environment where it formed, it probably worked. The problem is that it didn't stay in childhood. It got packed up and carried forward into every classroom, every workplace, every relationship, every room you've ever walked into since. Psychologists call this chronic self-minimization, not an occasional moment of humility, but a habitual reduction of the self in the presence of others. The apology isn't a response to a specific situation. It's a posture, a default setting that says, "I will make myself less before you ask me to." Here's where it becomes expensive. Most people who apologize this way don't fully realize they're doing it. The word has become automatic, background noise, like a nervous tic they've had so long they no longer feel it. But the people around them notice, and they don't just hear the apology, they build an impression from it. An impression of someone who doesn't quite believe they're allowed to be there. And here's the part that most people never realize. You are the one teaching them to think that. It shows up in 4 places, mostly. At work. You have an opinion in a meeting. It's a good one. You've thought about it, you know the material. And when you finally say it, it starts with, "I don't know if this is right, but..." or "This might be a stupid question, but..." or simply, reflexively, "Sorry, I just wanted to add..." You've already undermined your own contribution before anyone else could. You've pre-rejected yourself. And the people around you take note. Not consciously, but they do. The person who consistently hedges and apologizes signals that their ideas are optional, that they can be talked over, that they don't need to be taken seriously because they're not taking themselves seriously. In your relationships, you feel hurt by something. It's legitimate. Someone said something that landed badly or didn't follow through on something they said they would. You bring it up, and before the sentence is finished, it has an apology in it. "I'm sorry. I know I'm being sensitive." Or, "Sorry, I felt a bit..." You've apologized for the feeling that the other person caused. You've made yourself responsible for their comfort at the exact moment you're supposed to be telling them about your discomfort. For things that aren't your fault. The train is late. You arrive 5 minutes after the time you said, and you apologize as though you drove the train. It rains on the day of a picnic you organized. You apologize for the weather. A colleague makes an error that affects your team, and somehow you find yourself saying sorry as though proximity to the problem makes you responsible for it, when you're right. This one is the quietest and perhaps the most costly. You spot a mistake in a document, in a plan, in a conversation. You're correct, and you say, "Sorry, I might be wrong, but I think there's an error here." You apologized for being right. You gave the other person an exit before they'd even processed what you'd found. Here is the part that most people don't see coming. Excessive apologizing doesn't only change how you feel about yourself, it changes how other people treat you. Because humans, unconsciously, calibrate their behavior to the signals you send about your own value. When you consistently signal, "I might be a burden, I might be wrong, I'm probably taking up too much space," people believe you. Not because they've made a conscious decision to take you less seriously, but because you've told them again and again, in the most direct way possible, that that's the appropriate response. Researchers studying what's called self-silencing, the habit of suppressing your own voice to preserve a relationship, keep finding the same pattern. The more people minimize themselves, the more anxiety they report, the less seen they feel by the people around them, and the more they start believing that their needs matter less than everyone else's. You are not just suffering quietly, you are actively, invisibly, training the people around you to expect less of you than you have to give. The colleague who talks over you may have learned that you won't push back. The partner who doesn't ask how you're doing may have learned that you'll handle it alone. The friend who takes without offering may have learned that the offer wasn't necessary. Wait, does that mean this is your fault? No, it means the pattern has a mechanism, and understanding the mechanism is the only way to interrupt it. There's a particular kind of invisible exhaustion that comes from this. It's not the exhaustion of doing too much. It's the exhaustion of constantly managing the perception of yourself, of editing every sentence before it comes out, of monitoring how much space you're taking, how much need you're showing, how much of yourself is visible. You become a very skilled self-editor, and the version of you that appears in most situations is slightly, just slightly, smaller than who you actually are. The people around you respond to that version. They care about it even. But there's a distance built into those relationships that never quite closes, because they're reaching for someone who has learned to step back just before they can be touched. And then there's this. When you apologize constantly and automatically, the word stops meaning anything. A genuine apology, when you've actually done something wrong, when you want to repair something, carries weight. It says, "I see what I did, and I want to make it right." But when sorry is the first word out of your mouth in every situation, it becomes noise. You've spent the currency until it lost its value. Here is what needs to be understood clearly. You are not apologizing because you are weak or broken or fundamentally too much. You are apologizing because, at some point, making yourself small was the most intelligent response available to you. The child who learned to say sorry before asking for anything learned it in a specific environment with specific people who had a specific, limited capacity to receive their needs. That child was reading the room correctly. The apology was appropriate for the room they were in. But you are not in that room anymore. The people around you now, most of them, did not teach you that your presence is an inconvenience. They are not sighing when you ask for things. They are not keeping score of how much space you take up. They are responding to signals you've been sending since long before you met them. Unlearning this doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments. It happens when you walk into a room and catch the apology rising in your throat, and notice there's nothing to apologize for. When you share an opinion and let it stand without a caveat. When you bring up a feeling in a relationship and let the other person sit with it, instead of rushing to dissolve the discomfort yourself. It happens when you begin to feel the difference between the apology that means something, the one that repairs, that acknowledges genuine fault, that comes from real care, and the apology that means nothing because you've attached it to everything. The strange thing is that most people won't notice when you stop apologizing. They won't be offended. They won't think you're arrogant. Most of them will simply meet the version of you that was there all along. One day you'll stop saying sorry before every sentence, and what you'll discover is that nobody was asking you to disappear. You were doing that part yourself. If this landed somewhere specific for you, if you heard yourself in one of those scenes, leave it in the comments. I read every one of them. And if this is the kind of content that helps you understand yourself a little better, subscribe. There's more to say.